Ricardo, Gravios. Welcome to Joanna de Angelis, Spiritist Society. Can't see her because either I go in front of the camera. This is Joanna de Angelis, Spiritist Society, Jazz. You're all welcome here. Tonight we're gonna do our talking in English. For those of you who do not understand a lot of English, I will try to give some hints of the words in Portuguese of the main ideas. It's from the book Our Daily Bread, Pão Nosso. Adriana read for us, chapter 65. Let us be at peace, or depending on the translation, let us have peace. I changed it from the original schedule the name, because I like more the be at peace, because gives us the direct idea that we can do something, we can be responsible, we can take actions to be at peace. So I'm very happy of being here tonight. I can share with you that I'm not an expert in being at peace. There is a long journey for that, but I can share with you that I have, through what I've learned from the gospel, especially clarified gospel evangelho, especially clarified by the Spiritist doctrine, and when I apply in some moments of challenging experiences, I can feel the inner peace of the clear conscience of doing my duty on those situations. So this is the general theme for this study tonight, and I hope to share with you. So I want to start by a story that I heard from my father many years ago. I don't know the original source, but it's very connected to the goals for us tonight. So there was this little boy, Joãozinho, little John. He was a very smart boy. He wanted to play, and he came to his father. His father was sitting on the couch, reading the newspaper. So back then, the story, we would read news on the newspaper. Nowadays, it's on our hand, on our phone, on our pockets. It's not for everybody, but this is a major change that I have seen growing up. So anyway, father was reading the newspaper, jornal, and his boy, hey, daddy, let's play. And the father was busy, and I'm reading the news, so once I finish, we can play. And then little John went to do something else, and then he came back again. Hey, father, let's play. I haven't finished reading the news. And then little John left. And then, a little bit frustrated, the next time he came, hey, father, have you finished reading the news? And then the father, not yet. And then little John challenging his father. I think that's City. He wants to participate too. So little John challenging his father. You always say that there are so many bad news, so why you want to read about them anyways? And then father thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to teach him a lesson. So he closed the newspaper, and you're actually right, my son. There are so many bad news. There are so many conflicts in the world, so many problems there. But we shouldn't get so sad and disappointed because of them, because we live in this world. We cannot exclude ourselves from this world. But I'm going to give you a challenge. From what you said, and from what we study in our gospel at home, culto no lar, would you like to help to build peace in a world? And then, yes, of course, daddy. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise. So then the father, he said, like, he found there was a magazine of the newspaper with a picture of our world. And so he went there and he cut into very small pieces, like a puzzle. And he then told little John, he scrambled them. And so our planet, we can see, like, when our planet reach peace and harmony, we can see as all the pieces of the puzzles, they are connected and well functioning. Like all the institutions, the schools, and the governments, countries, and nations, they're all working together for peace. So you said you want to help contribute in building peace. So I'm going to give you a challenge. I want you to solve the puzzle, to find the right pieces and put them together. But don't worry, don't get frustrated. Take some time, take some effort, and then we can talk about it once you finish. So then father went back to reading this newspaper, and little John was first puzzled, but then he found some trick and came back like 5 minutes later. I finished, father. And he's like, what? Yes, I'm done. And he knew little John that he was an honest boy, so he wasn't lying. So when he came back, it was all the pieces were put together in the right place. And he's like, wow, so how did you do it? Well, first, I was trying to put all the pieces together, and it was really hard because they all like look alike in the map. But then once you were cutting the pictures, I remember that I was looking in the back of the page, there was a picture of a man. So I flipped the paper and I built the whole man, and then I just flipped them back and I had the planet. And then the father was like, oh, he's such a smart boy. Um, well, there is much more wisdom in what you have done. Because for us to build the whole world, to build peace in the world, it takes a lot of effort. And to put all those pieces together, it's a hard challenge. However, what you did is the shortest way, as we learn with the Spiritist doctrine and with the gospel. We connect the dots. We should start by building the whole man first. And so this is the goal for us tonight. This is on the book, Our Daily Bread. So maybe you can tell her the story later. Um, so this is what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to ask ourselves, is our planet Earth at peace? We're going to see how our perceptions is related to peace. And reveal some of the teachings that we can use to build world peace. Does it sound good? Good goal for us? Okay. Without peace inside of us, we will never reach the realms of true peace. So, is our planet at peace? No. What's happening in our planet? A lot of problems, conflicts. Even we don't have the world war anymore, right? But the countries, many countries are not at war, but for economical reason. This is what we hear sometimes. So do the French people love the British and vice versa? Not really. Do Americans love the Russians and vice versa?
Yes. Some people.
Some people.
No,
Right?
no. Be careful with your questions.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a friend in this Joanna. She's married to a Russian. I'm sure she loves him. Well, how about within our country, right? Talk about United States. Is all Americans loving each other? Right now, we are living a very interesting situation, right? We're living like ideology war, like the social media, people fighting against each other because of their different political views about many subjects, and there is all this rage online, or sometimes when you go into participate in protests or uh, various situations of our lives. And there is, right now, we're getting many news about intolerance in terms of religion choices, about the color of your skin or where you were born. And so this is part of our country too. So even within our country, we're still not at peace. How about, just to make a connection, when we are sick, usually there is at least one organ of body that's sick. Like if you have a sore throat, your throat is sick, right? Or any other kind of disease we may have. And then the units of life, which is the cells of that organs, are usually not all of them, but there is usually a big portion of them they are sick. They're not at harmony, not at balance. So falando sobre o nosso corpo, como as células do nosso corpo estão doentes quando os órgãos estão doentes. And then the unit of a society, which is our planet, we are talking about our society, the unit is family. So is our family at peace? You don't need to answer this one out loud, but chances are that we are constantly having many struggles in our family, dificuldades em família. Husband and wife, parents and kids, and all the others. We are in a planet of trials and expiations. So we are being tested towards our conscience if we understand and love and live the divine laws or the divine law. And through those trials, we can test and tell ourselves if we have learned the lesson. And in family, or at family, that's the place where I have most of those tests. For many of us, perhaps for most of us. Any conflicts, rights, arguments. To be at peace in this world. So that's the lesson from Emmanuel. It's the book. Emmanuel's one of the elevated spirits who have been working a lot in terms of spreading the gospel according to Spiritism. Through the leadership of Chico Xavier in Brazil. So he says in the message, it is impossible to breathe in a perfectly peaceful atmosphere if it is impossible to breathe in a perfectly peaceful atmosphere among the human beings due to ignorance and hostility. So that's kind of like what we talk about now. Like we have the ignorance and hostility in our home, in our communities, between countries, within the same country. And in hostility too, sometimes people, they want to cause us harm. And even people who love us, on some conflicts, they might be in a position that they want to hurt us. And I'm not excluding ourselves, we do the same too. So, but now putting back into this context, if we live in a world that's not at peace, then how can we be at peace? So we cannot fly away from this world yet. So we have to stay here. So it is kind of like an expiation for some of us who are looking for peace. And the teachings of the Spiritist doctrine is not first to exclude ourselves from the world, but then comes next. It is logical to seek for us, the apprentices of eternal life, to seek our inner serenity, procurar a nossa serenidade interior in face of the conflicts that seek to involve us constantly. So that's kind of like the message. And then he develops more. So then we can ask ourselves this question in front of the mirror, like the girl before the mirror. Am I at peace? Perhaps when you ask this question to yourself, será que eu estou em paz? May have come to your mind a situation where, family situation or work or traffic, am I at peace? And the situation perhaps came out of ignorance and hostility of somebody else. And then, so we're gonna learn next, as we talked about how we are living in an environment that usually doesn't foster peacefulness, how our perceptions can impact that, our sense of peace. So Emmanuel says, each incarnated mind is a center of spiritual government, subordinated to limitations while served by abilities expressed in the senses and the perceptions. So first, I would say the first part of this is to consider that each one of us is a government, and we, the immortal beings who we are the governors. Okay, so remember, all of you are governors, and in your mind and in your life, you are the governor, and we are governing our lives through some limitations. So just here, that is the first limitation we can think of, right? Can you guys say what it is? Incarnate, yeah. So what's that limitation? Who said that? Yeah. So what is the limitation? the body, right? Like I said, we cannot go to Jupiter now because we have this body that's holding us here and the gravitation force. Um, so we have the limitations. We cannot act as freely as we could, as if we were not incarnated. But that's not all. Our spiritual progress too. Our past mistakes, the impurities that we created through our bad choices, until we purify them, they come with us. They will never leave until we purify them. So then we are limited. And they are expressed in with the senses and perceptions. You guys remember from school senses? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Good, because I learned those words in Portuguese. But yeah, tato, visão, olfato, audição. And we have more, but those are the main ones, right? And perceptions. So this is key for us to develop the inner peace. We usually hear, see, and feel according to our inclinations and not according to what is real. Have you ever heard about this idea before? This idea is very widespread. I cannot track back the source of this idea, but Emmanuel is saying this in this book, which I believe was written in the 60s or 70s. And also here in California, in Santa Cruz, there was a college professor in linguistics. I think the pronunciation would be John Grinder, and Richard Bandler, a student that they developed this idea they called neurolinguistic programming. And now there's another professor there, Robert Dilts, in the University of Santa Cruz, that he still is working with this idea. And basically what they do courses for companies and people, coaching. But besides them, there is a lot of self-help books that talks about that, about this idea, about how we react and by our perceptions, like the way we perceive the events. So like if we're talking about a family conflict, perhaps the other person, the husband or the wife, came and said to me, maybe something that was true about me, maybe it wasn't true. But that moment of accusation, I felt maybe frustrated, irritated, and I felt at war, right? Willing to revenge and say, no, but you do that too. No, but you are this or that. And so that's the example of the challenge, the trial situation, the challenge situation to develop the inner peace. So there was the events. So that's what is real, it happened. And like we said before, maybe due to the ignorance of the other person or the hostility, maybe they wanted to, in that moment, they wanted to hurt us. But we react according to our inclinations. So if I have an inclination, if I have a strong confidence on who I am, I'm a mortal being, I'm a son of God, then I might not be affected by the other one accusing or attacking me, because I know that I'm in a progress. I know that I make mistakes and I have the right to make mistakes. And I know that I'm doing my best. But sometimes we are not connected to this truth, and sometimes we feel offended by that. So that's based on our inclinations. So I told this story before. I named this Sun and Shadow because I thought that those, maybe the names came to me as inspiration, because they reflect attitudes inside of us. So I'm gonna say again, and later I researched, there is online, somebody asked me last time where the story came from, and I found online this source. It says it's a Japanese folk tale. I don't think I can read, but you can just Google the House of 1,000 Mirrors. So there was these two dogs, and they like to explore like dogs like, and they found this house on top of a hill. So the first dog, Sunny, went there, very happy. Oh, I want to find out what's in this house. And as he came in, he had like very good expectations, and he looked inside, and he saw another friendly dogs. So he smiled at them, and they smiled back at him. And then he was so happy, and he left the house. He had such a good experience there. And then he told his friend Shadow, "Oh, I just went to the house. I think you should go check it out." But Shadow was kind of scary dog, and he was sometimes in anger, and he went there. Okay, I'm gonna check, but I don't think there's something good there. This house doesn't seem to be very friendly to me. So he came in, he had this suspicious look, and he saw that all the dogs were also suspicious. And so he defended himself by showing his teeth. But then all the other dogs showed their teeth back at him. And he left barking at them. Running out of room over here. And I'm trying to speak close to the computer so the person remote can hear. And when it goes to YouTube, people can hear better too. So, end of story, he left there thinking the house is terrible. I don't want to ever go back. And this story is telling about idea in our psychology, a nossa psicologia. We can see as this, as a metaphor of parts inside of us, that depending on our attitude, our perception of reality changes. So Joanna de Angelis in the book, Joanna de Angelis is the mentor of our house, is a elevated spirit that's also have been contributing to the Spiritist doctrine, development of the gospel according to Spiritism, and also the psychology, transpersonal psychology, or maybe we can say Spiritist psychology. So she's in a chapter that she's talking about the story of the woman who was caught in adultery, and they called her, or we called her, the adulterous woman, but she was a woman in need for affection. And also there was the adulterous man. And all the other ones who also were adulterous, throwing rocks, ready to throw rocks at her. And to tempt Jesus, they asked the question, what we should do. And Jesus said, the one who doesn't have sin, throw the first rock. So the Joanna de Angelis says, it was apparently easier for those men to attack the projection of the image hated in somebody else, rather than identifying it in one's innermost and overcoming it. So the same idea. So those men ready to throw the rock, it's also part of us, that when we are ready to throw our verbal rocks, our breaking cups, or whatever we do to attack somebody else. And so she's inviting us to reflect that we are perhaps attacking the projection of the image that I have of myself. And in psychology, we hear this context of what affects me on the other is mine. O que me afeta no outro é meu. So that gives us, again, the reflection of how our perception of reality affects our actions. And even deeper, that if something's bothering me in somebody else, maybe because I have that, and I'm looking at the mirror, like in the house of mirrors, and I'm reacting to the projection of myself because I'm proud and I don't want to see that I have the imperfection. So when I see in the mirror, I want to break the mirror. So that's the kind of the idea. So that's the theme of the night, but it's not done. I just put it here to ask a question. I just put the cover again. So where do you find peace here? There's a lot of peace in words, right? Ourselves. So, yeah, you're right. That's the whole theme of this study. So, Jesus is known. Yes. So Jesus is known as the Prince of Peace. So this is a painting of a prodigy child, age 7, I think. And he's well known as the Prince of Peace. We have the inner Christ, and now we have to develop to reach the perfection that he has already reached. And so he is the Prince of Peace. He came to earth, incarnated here, to teach us to be at peace. So in the book A Boa Nova, so this book is in Portuguese, there is a lesson, First Preachings, I believe it's chapter 1, that he comes to the Pharisees, and they're asking him, what are you doing here? And he announced that he came to help to build the foundations for the kingdom of God. And they ask, what kind of kingdom is that? With mockery, sarcasm. And he answers, the kingdom of God is the work of God in the hearts of men. And he says that his helpers are going to come from everywhere So we are all invited to be his helpers of the Prince of Peace, to build the kingdom of God in the hearts of men. Again, the invitation is not for us to build the kingdom of heaven on the heart of the others, in our hearts, because this is where free will is. And of course, as we do that, we can inspire others too. We can influence others. And he said, this work is done with the cinzel, of the goodwill. So our goodwill, so we're going to use our power to choose what to do, with the noble marble of the emotions. So that's the work of inner reform. We have been talking a lot and practicing that too. Hopefully everybody's practicing this. And then back to the book that I mentioned for Joanna de Angelis, she said that she also conveys the same idea. His kingdom was the landscapes and regions of the feelings, where the foundations of brotherhood could be set. So as we are doing this work, we are creating the foundations of true brotherhood, loving one another. So we are also contributing for the peace of the planet. And I wanted to bring this also to Kardec's books. This month we are celebrating Kardec, especially because the movie has arrived to the US, Kardec movie. And so in the Spiritist book, question 908, actually the previous questions too, and the next one, talk about the passions. In the chapter about the moral, let's see here, moral perfection. And we can see the word of passion being used to convey the same idea of emotions. He's asking what is the limit of the passions of our emotions? Are they good or bad? Kind of like that type of question. Does it make sense? He's asking, are emotions good or are they bad? And back then we didn't know a lot about emotions, scientifically speaking. In science, even nowadays, many scientists would still think in terms of we are rational beings and ignore that we are actually emotional beings. We are also rational and emotional. And the answer of the Spirits is passions are like a horse that is positive or useful when under control, but dangerous when untamed. So we have the emotions, they have a purpose to serve, to drive us to progress. But if we don't control them, we're not primitive people anymore. We're not here just to reproduce, to survive. They have higher purposes. So if we don't control and redirect our emotions, then we can cause damage to others. And this is how we know when our emotions are not good, is when we are causing harm on the others, when we're not controlling them, controlling our impulses. So back to Emmanuel, we usually hear, see, and feel according to our inclinations and not according to what is real. Then what should we do? Educate. Educate our seeing, our sight, our hearing, our taste and impulses, our emotions. So we are creating the foundations for constructive peacefulness inside of us. So that was part 2. And we still have a little bit more than 6 minutes for part 3. So basically what we said in part 1 is we question ourselves, is our planet, our country, or home, or even ourselves at peace? And we found the most likely the answer is no. And then we see in part 2 that how our perceptions are correlated to our sense of peace. And then we're going to go back to the recipe of building world peace. If you guys were here on some of our previous talks this year, I'm reusing some of the same ideas because I think they connect so good. I'm really amazed how they were chose, how my name fit into them through the schedule, and they really connect. So I talk about law of society, I talk about recipe for happiness. So building world peace. So in the theme of law of society, we saw the perspective of the immortal spirit. Human society is like a forest of mental creations. You guys remember when we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yes. So we are all here. We have all of our mental creations that we carry with us. And as a Joanna de Angelis Spiritist society, we are a forest of those mental creations, where each one of us, and the discarnate spirits too, who are also here either to teach or to learn, we are finding the reflection of ourselves, like the story of the dogs, Sunny and Shadow. So in our world, to building world peace, then uh, each one of us is going to work on that tree, right? Our inner tree. So I think the answer to these questions you guys already said. So how are we going to build world peace? So the starting point, me, myself, and Irene. So this is what we have been speaking of on this night. And then I bring back the recipe that my old brother taught me through the book Jesus in the Home by Chico Xavier. Um, and I'm going to summarize the story. I recommend you to read it too. So Thaddeus' disciple was asking Jesus, hey, say, Jesus, what is, sorry, I think it's missing one. Okay. So he asked Jesus, so how can I achieve happiness? And so we are Thaddeus here. Jesus is teaching us. And then Jesus asked back, what is your idea of happiness? So this is very important. Like sometimes we just look at the words and we ignore and we go next, next, next. But each sentence was chosen with a purpose for us. So when Jesus is asking is that he's giving us the control. I need to ask myself, what is my idea of happiness? I need to set my mind into a goal. Before I start to do a journey, I need to know where I want to go to. And then Thaddeus replies, happiness is peace for all. And then Jesus, right, I understand that. But what would make you personally happy? So he's going back to the question because the first answer maybe was not well developed, not well thought. Even though it was true, he wasn't really thinking what he was really looking for. And then he replies, and then I believe most of the lesson is he's giving many situations that we have in our daily lives where yes, when that happened, I wish this would happen to me. When that happened, I wish this would happen to me. And to summarize, I took him like one of the last paragraph where he's summarizing. I would like to be understood, respected, and held in esteem by others. So who wants that? Who is awake and want that? I want that. I really want that. I want to be understood. I want to be respected and held in esteem by others. And Jesus goes back. So if you desire happiness from the entire world, do unto others as if you would have them do unto you. And then if you guys want the development of that idea, I would recommend to go into YouTube on the recipe of happiness that we had a talk about that. Basically is since I cannot control others, I have that need and I want to fulfill that psychological need. So instead of waiting for the others do it to me, I'm gonna practice to myself. So I'm gonna practice understanding towards my own imperfections, toward my projections on the others. I'm going to understanding respect. So I'm gonna understand my limits so I can respect myself by respecting my limits. And have myself in esteem, even though I have those limits, I'm a child of God. So I love myself. And so I'm gonna practice this exercise. And as I'm practicing, to me, it's natural that I'm gonna do the same for others. It's the same process. To love myself or love myself in the mirror comes the same way. So if I can be more tolerant to my mistakes, I'm gonna naturally be more tolerant to my neighbors, and vice versa. So that's the original lesson. The what is the commandment? The greatest commandment: to love God up with all of your soul, all of your understanding, all of your heart, and love your neighbor as to yourself. And then Jesus says, concludes the message, so there is a progression on that. If everyone would follow that rule, we would be very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth. And that was the initial story of the little John. If we all start to work on our inner piece of the puzzle, then everyone eventually is going to get there. Either those who get inspired by us when we are doing that, and they do the same, because through my actions, they also felt respected and understood and esteemed. And so they are learning self-esteem or understanding through somebody else, but eventually they become also their governors of their future. And then it just grows because once we acquire virtue, we can never lose it. And that's our timeout. So those who still don't want to do this, they will have many still trials and expiations. And as we hear many of Spiritist speakers, the prophecy that was in Kardec's books, that we are living a time, and it's not like just today, but there's still like decades for that to happen, to finish happening. That some of those who don't want to contribute to building world peace, they're going to be expiated, they're going to be expelled to a different planets where they're going to help primitive spirits to grow, even though not intellectually immature, they have the intellectual development, but not the moral. So they still have a chance to progress there. And this is our talk for tonight. We talk about we are in an environment that not necessarily foster peace, and how our perceptions regarding this environment can influence our inner sense of peace. And we saw some tools based on the recipe that Jesus shared with us to practice understanding others, understanding ourselves, having the others in esteem, and the same for ourselves, and respecting others, respecting ourselves. We are contributing to build world peace, and we are contributing to build our inner peace. So as that's the conclusion. Like a message I want to say is, so we remember Jesus, so the Prince of Peace came here, and this is how he left the world. And even though in the extreme moments of physical pain, because he was in the material body, so he had the limitation of the physical pain. And also the moral pain, all his loved friends, not all, but almost all, abandoned him on the last moments for their own reasons. And he was hurt. In his case, of course, as a pure spirit, he's suffering morally, not because he was disillusioned about his friends, but because it was sad for them for having making the wrong choices. And he still, out of all the suffering, in his supreme moment, he's teaching a lesson. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So let us bring the gospel to our hearts. We are surrounded by people who are at suffering, and they say hurtful things to us, sometimes ungrateful. And let us use Jesus' example that had this inner peace and that spreading peace through his words, through his thoughts, through his heart. And let us do the same with our inner Christ. Let us practice forgiveness and be at peace. Thank you so much.